Thanks again, Phyllis. I attended Climate Reality Project or CRP Leadership Core training in early part of this year, which is where I first met Phyllis Bloomberg. And then I met Amani shortly before that training in March, because we first started working together at PA IPL together on March 1st, 2021, which we're coming up on our first anniversary. So congratulations, Amani, in advance. It is truly wonderful to be working with the inspiring people like Amani and Phyllis at PA IPL. So again, thank you both for inviting me to be with you this evening. As we explore the power of the sun tonight, let's think about the miracles that many of us celebrate in this winter season, particularly miracles of light. Light is a powerful symbol in many religions and cultures, and light in itself is truly a miracle. Being a Lutheran Christian, this concept was first introduced to me through Bible readings, and I believe it's shared in the Torah as well. From the first chapter of the book of Genesis, I'll share this quote. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light." And there was light, and God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. We just finished celebrating the Jewish holiday Hanukkah, sometimes called the miracle of light, all around the world. In my understanding, Hanukkah is the celebration of the Jews' miraculous victory over a tyrant king who forced the Jews to worship Greek gods, and the celebration of the rededication of the temple in Jerusalem via the miraculous burning of a very small quantity of oil. This oil was thought to be only enough to burn for one night, but it burned for 8 nights, a true miracle. This quote from Bible.com summarizes my understanding of Hanukkah. In Judaism, the menorah symbolizes the light of God and the light of the Torah. When Jews light the menorah on Hanukkah, they bring the light that God desires into every generation. They rekindle their passion for his word and share its light with others. The burning of olive oil created the lights of Hanukkah. Olive oil was and continues to be used for purification in many different religions or cultures. This purification or anointing with oil is still used today to consecrate buildings and people, and sometimes with the healing power of prayer to heal during certain ceremonies. The word Messiah in English comes from the Hebrew word Mashiach, which means to be anointed. In the Christian tradition, we celebrate the fourth Sunday of Advent this Sunday. The Advent season is the long time when Christians wait for the miraculous birth of Jesus, the Son of God, on Christmas Day. Christians consider Jesus, the Messiah, to be the light of the world, the ultimate light, our Savior. Those who follow Jesus are called children of the light. And Christians are called to do what Jesus did, to share his love throughout the world, or to share his light throughout the world. In following his path, Christians believe that there can never be darkness, similar to the way that the light of the sun is reflected off the surface of the moon to provide light in the darkness of the night, as referenced in John 1st chapter, verse 15. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. To be honest, since I am not a rabbi, priest, or pastor, I often feel uncomfortable quoting from sacred texts. So I would like to close our brief discussion of miracles with a stanza of poetry. This is from Walt Whitman's poem 24 from 1885. And Walt Whitman wrote all about miracles, summing up his thoughts in the last stanza of poem 24. To me, every hour of the light and dark is a miracle. Every inch of space is a miracle. Every square yard of the surface of the earth is spread with the same. Every cubic foot of the interior swarms with the same. Every spear of grass, the frames, limbs, organs of men and women, and all that concerns them, All these to me are unspeakably perfect miracles. Thank you all so very much for the hard work that you do in sharing your light with others. It is you who will make our world a better place for us, our children, and our grandchildren. You are all miracles. I just want to wish you all the best in this holiday season, whether you celebrate Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, or other holidays that I'm not mentioning today. Best wishes, and thank you for sharing with me tonight.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. That was beautiful. Maybe you really are an ordained pastor and you don't know it. You're so ecumenical. So now I want to turn to our main topic, which is talking about light from a different angle. I'm going to ask Elena Weissmann to talk. Elena is the, let's see, she is the regional director of the Mid-Atlantic part of Vote Solar. And according to the website of Vote Solar votes for 100% clean energy transition that puts the interests, health, and well-being of people at its center. And they work state by state, and Elena focuses on Pennsylvania issues. So she's very much aware of what's going on in terms of solar in Pennsylvania. I've asked her to talk for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll open it up for a general discussion. So take it away, Elena, and enlighten us in many ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis, and thank you, Kathy. That was such a beautiful opening. And I'm Jewish, and now that Hanukkah's over, I always feel really sad that I don't get to light the menorah anymore. And so I'm glad to be thinking about it at least and talking about light in other ways. So like Phyllis said, I'm the Mid-Atlantic Regional Director at Vote Solar. My name is Elena Weissmann, and just as a bit of background, I joined the organization in February from a sort of non-traditional route. I spent 6 or 7 years working in bail reform in New York. I worked on the bail fund that I worked at shut down because we achieved our mission of bail reform. I worked on the presidential campaign and then the Senate runoffs in Georgia, where I'm from. So now I'm here and learning a lot about solar, and I give that background just as a caveat that I'm not yet really a technical expert on these things. Phyllis knows so much, and so I feel like I'm like in the presence of a giant talking about this stuff, but I will do my best and try and answer all of your questions. So I'm just gonna share my screen. Oopsies. Sorry, one moment. Share.
And we have other experts too here on solar.
Oh, great. Well, not to make me even more intimidated.
No, not at all. We'll be happy to help you out if necessary.
Great. Can everybody see my screen? Okay. So I'm going to cover sort of what the basics of solar power are, which sounds like it won't be news to many of you, how it can look in Pennsylvania, and particularly what the impact can be for residences and farms. We'll talk about some of the sort of policy options that are on the table and how you can get involved moving forward. How do I go to the next slide? Okay. So it might not feel like it when it's so gray and dark outside, but the sun wakes up every day. It gives us enough power to do everything that we need. So even in just 1 hour, there's more sunlight falling on the earth, regardless of what the weather is in different places, than what the entire global population uses in 1 year. So this is a massive amount of power. It's measured in petawatt hours, which has way too many zeros for me to put on the screen. And just to sort of put it in perspective, we Earthlings, or the United States, uses 4 petawatt hours of electricity each year. And each hour, the Earth delivers 192,000 petawatt hours of to all 7 continents. I've got this little graphic on here to remind us of the significance of clean energy. Our founder loves to talk about this. When there's a huge solar spill, it's just called a nice day. So we're obviously have way in excess of what we need of solar power, and the question is just how to channel it. So just a few technical terms for folks who aren't super familiar with solar. It's typically, its output is typically measured in megawatts. So 1 megawatt of solar panels will generate what are called megawatt hours. So one panel 1 megawatt will generate 2,146 megawatt hours per year. A kilowatt is 1/1000th of a megawatt. And so when we talk about residential solar, like rooftop solar at your home, it's measured usually in kilowatts. So 5 kilowatts is the average. There are a lot of different kinds of solar. It can be ground mounted, it can be on your roof, it can be utility scale, it can be community solar, it can be owned in co-op form, it can be on a farm. We'll get into some of these terms, but essentially just, we're really gonna focus on the basics and what the impact of solar broadly can mean. So it's all about the sun. I have this graph in here because I do want to emphasize that efficiency really matters. So this shows the average number of homes that are powered by a megawatt of solar. As you can see, there's a huge range from about 80 homes to over 250 homes in California. So that can depend on whether your housing stock is newer or upgraded. Has it been weatherized? Do you have appliance standards that require your appliances to be efficient in your state? It obviously also depends on the weather. Are you using a lot of air conditioning in the summer or not? And you can see Pennsylvania is just right here below average at about 115 homes. The average is 190 homes. And I know that Philadelphia has some of the oldest housing stock in the country. And so that could, weigh heavily on this average too. So one of the big questions that comes up in the legislature about pushing for solar is, what is the cost of it? And this is a really difficult question to answer because, as any good economist would tell you, part of cost is opportunity cost. So what is the cost of not doing anything? What is the cost of our current slide into climate disaster, the cost of emissions from polluting plants, all of those things. And the cost of solar should, the cost of solar should also reflect the economic benefits of the solar. So how many jobs are going to be created? What are people going to save on their bills, knowing that solar is more efficient than many other forms of energy? But what I have here on this graph is an average home in Pennsylvania. The cost you have to pay, upfront, depending on what type of company you use, that could be $10,000 or something like that. Over the course of 10 years, you could save almost $27,000. So ends up being a good deal if you have the upfront capital. But important to sort of put that in perspective with other states where there are many more incentives upfront to lessen the need for that bigger payment. So we can come back to this cost and benefits a little later when we talk about some of the policy options. Oh, but I didn't see if people are writing in the chat. Oh, no, not for me. But you can feel free and raise your hand or write in the chat if you have a question while I'm going through this. So this is what I was mentioning before. The cost of renewable energy over its lifetime is really falling, especially over the last 10 years. So you can see solar panels is now the cheapest. Natural gas is above it. Obviously, coal is more expensive too. I think people know that. Relying on a gas peaker plant all the way up at the most expensive. And so this is a point that we really want our legislators to be aware of, is that solar panels are not only good for the environment.
I think Elena's muted.
Oh no, am I still?
You're back.
Oh, what did you guys miss? This whole slide?
I think you were only muted for about 15 seconds.
Oh, now I can't hear Phyllis, but I think she's talking. Is there a bot in here?
No, that's fine. You was about 15 seconds. Thanks for catching me. I somehow muted everybody. I don't know why.
So I was just pointing out that solar, this is something that we really want legislators to know. I think solar has a reputation because of its origin as something that is for rich people who are homeowners, and it's sort of like a first world problem to deal with. This is a graph that is, super important to show that solar panels are now cheaper over their lifetime than any other of these typical forms of energy. And so we want legislators to know that solar is not just good for the environment, it's also good for the state budget and the overall economy. So I'll just turn a little bit more to residential solar. This is a table that shows specifically for the Philadelphia region what savings would look like over the course of residential solar installation's lifetime. So in Pennsylvania, the state, since there's not great state incentives, it's showing you the federal tax credit. It's showing, so like I said before, average size 5 kilowatts on a home. Over the course of 7 to 8 years, you could save, here's the net profit. And so it doesn't have on here how much it costs to install, it just has this average. So, there's a significant amount of savings that residential homeowners can realize if you have a good enough roof and the means to pay that upfront cost and put solar panels on your own home. Of course, there are these other benefits too. It's clean, it's green, it can make your home more resilient in case of outages. And I have on here the neighbor effect. I saw a statistic from one of our partners at Solar United Neighbors that your neighbor having solar power and talking to you about it makes you twice as likely to go solar yourself. So there is a network effect here that is really powerful as well. I also wanted to let you all know about community solar. So community solar is a way for people who don't have access to those things that I just mentioned. So a sunny roof, owning your own home, access to upfront capital, for a way for these people to also participate in the solar economy and power their homes with solar. So it is essentially an array that is located nearby in your community that many people can subscribe to, and through a financial mechanism where essentially the company is selling credits to the utility company and passing benefits on to you, you have guaranteed savings on your utility bill each month. Depending on the state, that can be 8%, it can be 20%. And in most states, there is a requirement that these projects serve low and moderate income households who have much higher energy burdens than their wealthier neighbors. So the percentage of their income that they're spending on their energy bill is higher than average. So it's a way to sort of promote energy and economic justice in poorer neighborhoods, So community solar is great. It's a way for people to participate in the solar economy without having their own land or roof, but it is not authorized in Pennsylvania. So this is one of the big policy goals that I'll mention at the end, because it is really a win-win-win. Oh, and I do want to just mention, because there's some confusion about this, I know with our members, that community solar is different than an electric choice program. And through an electric choice program, the utility companies are still sort of like in the driver's seats. You don't have guaranteed savings. It's not a decentralized energy system where communities can sort of like direct their energy future. And there are actually some bills in the legislature that are masquerading as community solar bills, but are in fact just more sort of electric choice programs. So that's something to be aware of. And I did also want to mention that I also work in New Jersey. They're a good example of how the community solar program can wear many different hats. So community solar can be located anywhere. I'll get to this in a moment. In Pennsylvania, one of the biggest forces behind the bill is the Farm Bureau, many farmers want to lease out some of their land to have a community solar array. In New Jersey, 100% of the projects that were approved for next year are on brownfields, landfills, or existing rooftops, mostly of warehouses. They have a big warehouse sprawl issue in New Jersey, like Pennsylvania. So just flagging that it can help sort of reclaim land that has been either degraded or underused. And so community solar is one way where farmers can benefit from the solar economy. I think many people know that farms in Pennsylvania are really struggling. There was, I think, a 20% increase in farmer bankruptcy in 2020 since the prior few years. I know Pennsylvania is also losing a lot of farmland to new neighborhood developments, so like suburban sprawl. And community solar is a way for farmers to choose the sun as a crop, essentially, and make some money from it, especially if they are struggling. Like I mentioned, the Farm Bureau is one of the biggest champions of community solar in Pennsylvania. PASA, which is the Pennsylvania I'm going to get it wrong, but they do sustainable farming. They have a lot of sort of spokespeople for community solar and solar expansion generally, people who want to be able to lease out their unused land or underused land for farm leasing. But many people in rural areas, so I have NIMBYism on here, which stands for not in my backyard. Many people in rural areas are now voicing opposition to what they're naming solar farms, saying that it will ruin their view and their way of bucolic life and their sort of lines of sight in rural Pennsylvania. So that is one hurdle. The real hurdle to this, though, is that the legislature, out of spite for how Governor Wolf has joined Reggie through an executive order. I don't know if that's something people have been following or familiar with. I see some nods. As revenge for that, they are really not touching anything climate or clean energy related. So this is sort of like one of those win-win slam dunk bills that doesn't really have a lot of opponents, but has not been able to gain traction because of that pettiness going on in the legislature, I'll say. I did also want to flag, as this picture suggests, that solar on farms is not only an economic benefit to farmers, it can also be a benefit to their land. So the land underneath solar panels, as you can see, it's not like all the way on the ground, there's space underneath it. That land can lie fallow. You can move these, from year to year, which is obviously an undertaking, but that land does not get ruined by any means. It can actually be preserved. And it can also be used to plant pollinator species or as an area for goats or sheep to graze. It's called agrivoltaics when you combine the benefits of solar generation and farming techniques on farms. It's very trendy. So yeah, I have some more stats about the farms that were lost. I see 6,000 farms were lost between 2012 and 2017. And like I said, there's been a rise in bankruptcies since then too. One other way that farmers can benefit from solar, in addition to community solar, is through a land lease payment. So that would be sort of utility scale solar, which is much larger than a community solar installation. Those payments to farmers average around $1,000 each year. And per acre, it's about 3 times the annual farm income. So they're very lucrative, and they're also guaranteed for 25 years when the utility or the state enters those agreements with farmers. And solar fields can also be planted with cover crops, which I didn't mention before. I also wanted to mention storage. I know that's not totally what we're focusing on tonight, but it is a necessary ingredient for getting us to 100% renewable energy. That's not because solar flow is unpredictable. It is because it can be intermittent. So like we mentioned at the beginning of this call, the sun is not always shining. I think you all know that. And having battery storage is a way to make sure that the grid is capturing all that energy and storing it in areas, especially that are most vulnerable to blackouts or who need the most assistance with resilience. And so I have on here that storage can really be a tool to advance equity. We at Vote Solar work on solar as a tool to advance equity, and we're more and more trying to couple that as much as we can with local storage solutions to make sure that communities essentially have their own little microgrid, and can have a decentralized and more democratic energy production means that they can, you know, in an ideal world, also own and operate. So a couple things on the policy horizon. Number one is the AEPS renewal, that stands for the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard. In other states, the acronym is RPS, Renewable Portfolio Standard, but in Pennsylvania, it actually includes natural gas. And so that's why it has a different name than in other states. What this does, it's a mechanism that puts an obligation on an electricity supply company to produce a certain amount of their electricity from renewable energy sources. So Pennsylvania actually passed a really good, for the time, AEPS portfolio in 2004. It said that the state should have an 8% renewable goal by 2020, which they have surpassed. There's a 0.5% solar goal. So that was good in 2004 when they passed it. It is now way behind neighboring states and has essentially flatlined in Pennsylvania as we've met those goals. So just as an example, like the two bordering states of Pennsylvania have either 50% or 100% renewable goals for by 2050 or 2035, whatever it may be. So there's a campaign to introduce or renew the AEPS standard in Pennsylvania. So that's something that we're working hard on at Vote Solar in coalition with many other organizations. The second is a community solar bill. So I mentioned all the great benefits of community solar and that it is not currently authorized in Pennsylvania. There is a bill, there's actually a few bills in the legislature that would authorize community solar. They all do it in slightly different ways. I'll show you when I have an action alert to contact legislators about these. We tend to just say we support community solar rather than picking one of the different bills. The third thing that we're working on or planning to work on is the reinvestment of funds that come from Reggie. So for those, I think most people are probably familiar with Reggie, or should I give it a little explainer? Good. Yes, people know about Reggie? Okay, so the state is going to, if you know all goes as planned and Pennsylvania joins Reggie, there will be billions with a B dollars in revenue to reinvest and mitigate air pollution in Pennsylvania. That's what it will have to be used for. So solar power counts as one of those ways. And so we have very long and detailed recommendations for how those funds should be invested, prioritizing environmental justice communities and also what the state calls energy communities. So places that are sort of in transition from a fossil fuel economy. And then on the horizon in the future that we're going to be working on next year, and I would just sort of encourage you to keep on your docket, is a package of environmental justice bills that the Black Legislative Caucus introduced about a month ago. They're all significant. The one that we're sort of most interested in that we've worked on in other states too would give the public a voice and power to say no to permits that polluting plants are putting forward in order to open new facilities in environmental justice communities. So it'll basically require them to consider the cumulative impacts on people's health and on the disparities that are very present in environmental justice communities. There's also a bill that would prevent homeowners associations from prohibiting rooftop solar in their neighborhoods, which is currently allowed in Pennsylvania. So that's on our horizon for next year too. So that is, those are the things that are on the policy horizon. Here we go. We have an action alert that I can put in the chat. We're working with a lot of different other groups to get people to contact their representatives and state their support of these solar goals through the AEPS, through community solar, through the reinvestment of Reggie funds. We really just at this stage want solar to be on the menu for all of Pennsylvania's legislators. in whatever way that it can be. So these are the three means that we're pushing for the most. But if you have a particular connection to solar or to one of you know, if you're a homeowner, if you're a farmer, if you know a homeowner or a farmer, or you know someone who could benefit from community solar, we're encouraging people to share their personal connection and what impact solar could have on them with their legislators. And down the line, there will be a public comment period on where those Reggie funds should go. So we can keep people posted about that. Another thing is that there is an empty seat at the Utility Commission. And we are hoping to do some public outreach and education around why that seat should be filled with someone who is committed to sustainability and environmental justice and not not a fossil fuel salesman. So we'll be doing some work around that too, and that will be a way for people to get involved in the future. But for now, I'll just stop there and see if people have questions.
Couple of questions in the chat. Joyce asked, must solar power work in conjunction with some other type of energy?
Must it work with, so that's a good question. You know, it depends on how much energy your home uses. I think most people in Pennsylvania, if you have rooftop solar, your whole home is not being powered by solar. If you live in another place that is much sunnier or has good battery storage options, then you could be powering your whole home with solar. But typically it is like, you know, a combination of sources.
So just to be put a little bit more point on that, if you have solar, your metering is a little different, and the electric company is recording when you're making power and when you're taking power. So like right now, my solar panels are obviously not doing anything, so I'm taking power from the grid, but on a bright sunny day, I'm giving power to the grid.
And you get paid for that through net metering.
Well, I don't want to get into those points because they're really in the weeds. But Joyce, does that help you?
Yes, Elena, I guess I've heard fossil fuel people criticizing the solar panels because they say, well, on days like today, when there's no sun, you're going to need energy from your fossil fuels anyway. So that was my question. Like, is there ever going to be a time when the solar panels will be able to capture the sun? I think you talked about it, about battery power, and store it so that when the sun is not out, you can draw from that to use the power as well.
Right. And when we, you know, at Vote Solar, think about 100% renewable future, it's not necessarily 100% solar future. You know, there's also wind power in Pennsylvania. There's talk of hydropower in Pennsylvania. So yeah, it doesn't need to be that as a goal.
Okay. So we
Okay.
have to be thinking of utility scale in the whole city and not just one rooftop.
Right.
We do. I'll say the sort of Vote Solar vision is a more distributed grid and less reliance on utility scale installations, so that power can be locally owned, jobs can stay in the community, and you can have more control over what your smaller grid looks like. But that can look different everywhere.
And Kelly has a bunch of observations of places that you could be working with. Maybe Kelly, you'd like to talk.
So we work with the Philly Energy. Who are you talking about? Well, yes, we work with them, and we work with a few other Philly-based organizations. But if you have more suggestions, would love to work with them too.
Yeah. So you do work with the Energy Authority?
Yeah. Our main contact there actually just left, but we are in touch with them for sure.
Okay,
And
awesome.
And we have I have a federal counterpart who is following everything that's going on with Build Back Better and the infrastructure bill, and working on recommendations for how that can best be brought to Pennsylvania, especially in conjunction with some state policy changes.
That's awesome. And then I just have a quick question too, because oftentimes when I'm in a room with people who have questions about solar PV and just solar in general, there's always someone that brings up the issue of how much water it uses. I was curious, do you have any partnerships with other organizations that work with water, or what your thoughts are on that?
How much water solar power uses, like in
Yeah.
production?
In production, and also just like taking care of it, because I know that it gets overheated pretty quick and it often has to be like wet down like every hour. So I was just curious.
Oh, I never heard about that needing to, I guess maybe that could happen in a very warm climate.
And also the way that some solar energy works is that it has to be heated up in water for it to then start to work, if you know about that. So that was just my question. I'm not trying to
I know you're not trying to play gotcha.
Yeah.
I can't say I know anything about that. I've never heard of that before. And actually I hear a lot more frequently, especially in Pennsylvania, about how solar maintenance and solar installation jobs are no replacement for coal or fossil fuel jobs because it requires so little maintenance, and that, you know, people tend to work as an installer and then not have much of a job after. That's the more common critique that I hear. So it's interesting.
And Art wants to know, do you have suggestions for speaking to Republican legislators to get them on board to support solar? When you can tell you can do that, you won't be speaking to our group, you'll be talking internationally.
I do have some suggestions for that. First of all, there are groups that are conservative that work on climate issues and on clean energy issues. They tend to not always want to work together with us or with others in our coalition because they don't want to be viewed as like captive to a liberal cause. But they do exist and are doing good work. I think something that typically lands with Republican legislators when it comes to this stuff is the economic benefits piece. So I know in Pennsylvania, most of the clean energy bills and the reinvestment topics that we've been working on are always pushing for union jobs, you know, life-sustaining jobs, a way to prioritize energy communities, like I was mentioning before. So that's certainly helpful. I also think that there is a lot to be said for the sort of community and local self-sufficiency that comes with a push for clean energy. And this is a harder sell when it comes, I guess, to natural gas than it is for coal or like petrol, but to be less reliant on buying from foreign markets is something that appeals to Republican legislators also.
And Art has a follow-up question, and we'll let Bill speak after this. How are the utilities and industries complying with or complaining about Reggie obligations?
And then, yeah, that's Bill sort of answered that it hasn't happened yet. So no one has to follow any rules yet. So there's no compliance or non-compliance at this point. I know that utilities are not in favor of Reggie coming into place, though I don't know how specifically they're complaining about it besides showing up at public hearings and testifying against Reggie. A lot of the points that they make are that, you know, this will be more expensive for consumers, and they sort of ignore evidence from other states about how it ends up lowering energy bills for people.
So Bill has been working on Ready for 100 renewable energy at the municipal level for a long time. And he put in the chat, here's a review of the West Rock Hill Township solar array that supplies 100% of their municipal operations electricity needs, with a payback projected to be in 11 years. A little bit about not only West Rock Hill, but all the other communities with that you know about. Thanks.
That is really cool. I have not seen this. And yeah, something that I have a regulatory director for the Mid-Atlantic too. Something that we've been talking a lot about is how we can, you know, surpass some of the state level legislative gridlock and think about working with localities or with school districts, people at the county level on campaigns just like this, because there are plenty of communities who are interested in making this happen without waiting for the state to act. So this is a great example.
So Bill, would you like to tell us a little bit? Thanks.
So I guess to just be ready for 100, a Sierra Club campaign has been rolling out in southeastern Pennsylvania over the last 4 years. So we now have 39 communities that have committed to 100% clean renewable energy by 2035 for electricity and 2050 for heat and transportation. So that's a really good sign. And those 39 are now collaborating and starting to create energy transition plans to give their munis action steps for how to start to make that transition. So any of you that might be interested in trying to get that, into your own local municipality, feel free to go to a public meeting and just speak up during public comments and say, hey, have you heard all these other communities are starting to go for clean energy? And if you'd like to connect with Ready for 100, I'll put the link for our regional Ready for 100 in the chat also. And just a quick statement on Reggie, if you want.
Sure.
So today the House voted in concurrence with the Senate to reject Reggie. So that resolution now goes to the governor, and we expect the governor will veto it. And then it has to go back to the House and the Senate for 2/3 of each chamber to override. It turns out that the vote in the Senate was by one vote, less than 2/3 or the other way around. And same in the House. It's like a difference of 1 or 2 votes. So if the representatives and senators keep the votes the way they are, it's doubtful that they would override the governor's veto, and then Reggie rulemaking would go forward. It probably won't be implemented because it has to be on a quarter basis. So the earliest it could go into effect would be April 1st. But the legislators have threatened that they're going to put up some judicial fights to take it to the court to also block it. But so that's a really worthwhile cause if anyone wants to help promote Reggie.
Are you talking about the bill that that essentially prevents Reggie or what is it, taxing or and it's one that's been around for a while. 613 comes to mind. I don't know.
I'm not familiar with that specific bill, but a lot of the arguments that the representatives and senators are against Reggie are, of course, loss of the coal jobs in Western Pennsylvania. And then the other issue they're concerned about is that it is a tax, and that instead of it should be legislatively enacted rather than through an executive order. But the Clean Air Act of Pennsylvania makes clear that the Department of Environmental Protection does have the authority to implement actions that will give us cleaner air. So, I think that will have to be fought out, but we hope that clean air argument will stand up.
So Art asked the question,
Oh, you muted, Phyllis.
Can't hear you, Phyllis.
Uh-oh, our computer went off.
I think we got your question, Art, right? Art, yeah, Arthur, Art.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. I will give a further plug for the Sierra Club Ready for 100 efforts. We work with the Sierra Club in New Jersey too, and you guys have really good resources for just like lay people who want to get involved by showing up at a hearing, writing an op-ed, responding to something in the paper, as a letter, through a letter to the editor. I think that stuff is so helpful, and we've definitely given it to our members before.
If in fact, just a thought regarding that bill that apparently passed and is nearly at 2/3 of the votes against RGGI. if anybody knows if anybody knows people who live in the districts of the Republicans and also the 8 or 9 Democrats that must have voted for it, please have them call or write to those legislators to encourage them to change their vote and support it. Earlier, I tried to do that to 1 or 2 Democrats, and I couldn't get through because I'm not in their district.
So Reggie's been around for about 10 years in lots of other states. So it's working in other states. And so I was trying to get at Art's question about, how do the utilities complain or the industries complain about Reggie in the other states?
I mean, I'm not sure how what their like complaints or non-compliance really looks like. The part that I usually hear more about is like emissions avoided, health costs avoided, where the reinvestments are going. So I tend to only hear the good news about it, but I'm looking online and there is a lot of write-ups out there around how it's going and what state utilities can do a better job of, things like that. So I might have to get back to you on that.
And regarding Art's comment about being able to reach into legislative districts that are voting against it, Pennsylvania Conservation Voters has a phone banking program. And what they've started to do, or they've been doing for a while, actually for the last couple of months, is that they ask us volunteers to call into districts where they want to influence the legislator and ask those residents in that district to make the call to their legislator. It's you can imagine phone banking and trying to convince somebody to do a call for you. So it might be a little bit of endurance match, trying to keep making calls, but I think they've had success. They said they had 52 volunteers they'd reached that had been willing to call and to those districts. So, and then the other environmental groups, Penn Environment, Penn Future, Sierra Club, they're meeting weekly on Tuesdays, and there's a clean energy coalition with other stakeholders that are working on different strategies on how to help uphold Reggie. And part of it is to help educate the legislators that there will be hope to help retrain their employees that are losing fossil fuel jobs. So during today's arguments about the resolution, a lot of the naysayers were saying, we're losing jobs from Pennsylvania. People are going to, other states, that there's been a decline in industry and employment. And they say that if Reggie ends up reducing the coal business, we're going to lose even more people. On the positive side of that, though, the Reggie funds will be used to help, build up new renewable energy jobs, create a whole new businesses. So the net is that there will be an increase of jobs by 2030 and an increase in income or money within Pennsylvania. But of course, the people that are, in the coal districts, really don't listen to that.
I loved Elena's comment that in New Jersey, all the money is going to putting solar panels up, solar arrays up in areas where it's brownfields. And I just thought, wow, we could be doing the exact same thing here so we have so many polluted areas. It could be abandoned coal mines as long as they're sealed well. It could be land. It could be all those, the rooftops of all the distribution centers and warehouses and things of this nature. Other questions or comments about Let the Sun Shine In?
Excellent program. I really appreciated your presentation. I hadn't heard about Vote Solar. So I guess in terms of your outreach, you mentioned you're regional for Jersey and Pennsylvania. Are there other similar entities across the country?
Yeah, so it's a national organization with presence in probably 28 states. So there are other versions of me covering the entire country, or like every region. We're not active in every state. And then a huge part of what we do is at the PUC. So we have a big technical regulatory expertise team who will get involved in almost every rate case that happens in the states that we're active, and pushing for a fairer and more equitable grid with solar as a part of it.
Nice.
So we need to hope that Reggie will pass, community solar will pass. We can change our alternative energy standard. There's an awful lot we have to be doing at the Pennsylvania level as well as obviously at the national level. But I want to talk about, for the next minute or two, what would you like topic-wise for our January meeting? Some of you are new and some of you are regulars who come on a very regular basis. So topics that you might like to hear about.
I guess I would like to hear about for when I have conversations with people from different demographics. I often see that there is a struggle for people to engage in the climate justice initiative because people are not able to get their basic rights. They're worried about getting their bills paid and getting their basic food and housing. So I guess like a conversation in that and how we can invite people in by having these resources or just having it as accessible language, if that makes sense.
Elena, does Vote Solar do that?
Yeah, we have like community workshop trainings or we did have a lot of them before COVID, and we absolutely have a whole team of people who can help put that together.
Super cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Other topics that people are interested in? Kelly, I think your idea is really climate justice type of stuff that we can really build, pay back in for the climate communities that are on the front lines.
Yeah.
Sort of related to that is resiliency, which there's probably a greater need in poorer communities than in wealthier ones in terms of trying to improve insulation and other ways to improve efficiency, energy efficiency.
Any other ideas? More information about climate justice, environmental resiliency activity that's happening in Pennsylvania. Okay, that sounds wonderful. I think that would be a very good topic to be talking about. Several of you have mentioned that. So what's happening in Pennsylvania, and I will look into that and see what we can do. So we're looking for climate justice and environmental resiliency within Pennsylvania. Anybody know, in answer to Dorothy's comment, any organizations or anything that's happening? Bill, Elena, Amani, Joyce, some of you I know are very involved.
There's another organization called Power that's different than this organization Power that we work with. And so does Clean Water Action. Those are our two primary partners on environmental justice. So I can put their websites in.
And Mom's Clean Air Force, is it called? They work with EGF, Mom's Clean Air Council. That's what I think it is called. Okay. There's an awful lot that's been going on, good stuff in the chat. So we will have not only the recording sent to you, but you'll also have access to the chat conversations. There's a lot of wonderful resources and URLs that are going up in the chat. Without any other questions or comments, I just want to leave you with a note that it's 8 o'clock tonight, and in 11 hours, the sun will be back. So, much for coming tonight, and have a wonderful holiday, a lot of full bright lights, and we'll all be together again in the new year for all kinds of other issues, and just take a moment or two to reflect on how much progress we've made in 2021 compared to where we started the year with. It was not a very good beginning of the year, but I think it got better. So thank you so much, and see you next month.
Thank you all. Happy New Year.
Thank you.